In this video, we'll get an overview of some of the different types of animation. One you may be the most familiar with is frame-by-frame animation. This is also called hand-drawn animation or cell animation, which is short for celluloid. And those are the transparent sheets that old-school animators used to draw and paint onto to make animated films, like, for example, Bambi that we see here on the right. Now, the important aspect to frame-by-frame animation is that each frame is hand-drawn. Sometimes that's done with ink and paint on paper or clear celluloid. Sometimes that's done digitally through a drawing tablet or just with a mouse. Frame-by-frame animation is what's responsible for most of the early Disney animated films pre-about 1990. Next we have stop-motion animation. This is a little bit similar to frame-by-frame. The difference is it uses physical objects instead of drawings. So like we can see here in this example called Furniture Poetry by Paul Bush, the animator is using a series of similar photographs with small changes in between each one to give us the illusion of motion or animation in a scene. Now, stop motion is possibly the most challenging type of animation since it has to be captured in what's called straight ahead fashion, where the animator sets up the scene, takes photographs starting at the beginning and works through to the end. Now, that's different than hand-drawn animation, where an animator can draw different stages of the animation, say the first frame and the middle frame and the end frame, as a guide of what to draw in between. Now, there are lots of variations on stop-motion animation that you might be familiar with. For example, Claymation, which uses posable clay figurines. And a great example of that is the Wallace and Gromit series. And here we can see an animator named Lloyd Price making small changes to the posable characters that are then photographed to go into the animation. A different style of stop-motion animation is called cutout animation. Here in this example, we can see Lotte Reiniger, a very early pioneering female animator, making cutout animations with black silhouettes on a white background. This style of animation is also what was used in the early seasons of South Park, using construction paper and making small changes to each of the characters and photographing them to build up the overall animation. Pixelation is a style of animation that's similar to stop motion. The difference is that pixelation uses short clips of video or film instead of still images. So we can see a great example of pixelation in this video for the White Stripes Hardest Button to Button, which was directed by Michel Gondry. Next up we have 2D digital animation. Now this is sometimes also called tween animation, and that's because an animator will set different poses of a scene or a character, and the computer will figure out all of the subtle changes in between those two poses. 2D digital animation works with vector and or pixel images and takes those into layered compositions that are then transformed in 2 dimensions on a timeline. And a great example of that is Rick and Morty, which is a 2D digital vector animated show that also sometimes incorporates hand-drawn segments along with 3-dimensional elements. Some common tools for making 2D digital animation include Adobe After Effects, Adobe Animate, and Toon Boom Harmony. Now, a special subtype of 2D digital animation is called motion graphics. We can think of motion graphics essentially as animated graphic design. So these are animations with a special emphasis on text and typography, and a prioritization of clear communication over fictional storytelling. So we can see some examples of motion graphics here in the branding for the French broadcast channel La F. Last but not least, we have 3D digital animation. This is also sometimes called computer-generated imagery, or CGI for short. And in this style of animation, 3D models are positioned in virtual space and then tween animated in a really similar strategy to what we would use for making 2D digital animation motion paths. If you've ever seen a Pixar film, you're familiar with 3D digital animation, and we can see in the example here, the director Lee Unkrich working on Toy Story 3. Some common tools for working with 3D animations include Maya, Blender, and Cinema 4D. Okay, so that's a quick overview of several of the major styles of animation.